Hello, souls and demons, and welcome back. Today's story is Our Leaders Are Sacrificing Us to an Evil God, Part 2, written by Cecily, 1987. So sit back, grip your seats, and enjoy. Yes, what do I call you? I replied, watching Private Castillo's blood dripping down the creature's protruding jaw. Desecrator of flesh, the thing said back without a moment's consideration. A traveler in searing pain, a rancid poison of hope, feeder of the maggots, the raping of the hopeless, pain and pleasure. Desecrator? I mumbled back. I felt the warm liquid of piss running down my leg. Yes, brother captain, growled the creature in its booming voice. That name will do. It is enough for sentient meat like you to understand. But I may help you pronounce my real name with your screams of torture. Only the most exquisite cries of pain can truly be labeled to me. I felt as if I was going to faint, and was only being held up by the unnatural magic around me. I had faced death before, but this was different. This thing sucked the soul out of me. I felt sorrow and terror like never before. Why do you want? I whispered. The desecrator outstretched a palm to caress my face. I tried to pull back, but my upper half had completely frozen up by the cruel thing's magic. His bone-like hand was freezing cold, blistering my skin as it made contact. I started to scream, but was gagged as it stuck its thumb into my mouth, my tongue freezing to it, painfully. What do I want with you? Something so insignificant like you. You are no son of Adam. You are not made in the likeness of the divine. Like you tell yourself as you worship your non-existent God. There is nothing special or of purpose in any of you. You are only meat. A quivering mass meant to tear and scream for my master, for his amusement. Your resistance only postpones the inevitable decay of your carnal vessel, but the loss of hope makes the meat taste so much sweeter. He quickly removed his hand from my face, pulling off a layer of skin as he did. I coughed up blood and realized my neck and head could move again. Suddenly, the deady sprung from stillness into action, barging over the razor wire to attack my men. I could hear their muffled screams of pain as the deadies tore into them. The evil magic held them steady as noses were bitten off, chunks of skin peeled away, and guts torn out onto the dirt. It was a feeding frenzy on the defenseless soldiers. This was hell. I was in hell. How long had I taken mine and my men's life for granted? How long had I been so comfortable with insulting the dark god? One by one the screams died down, leaving only the wet chewing and guttural noises from the deadies to remain. The deadies clustered around the bodies, eating them as they stood upright, stripping the dead soldiers to the bone. I had been with these soldiers for years. They trusted me to lead them into hell and out again. But their faith was misplaced. They all died a terrible death, without even the honor of fighting back. I wept tears of sorrow while forced to stand before the desecrator. I ran through everything in my mind. Nothing made sense. In the 50 years we had been fighting off the invasion, nothing like this monster had ever appeared before. Since the portals appeared in our world, they had never made it through, We had sacrificed countless lives to keep that darkness at bay. We had grown too confident, too relaxed about fighting the enemy. "Why do you call me brother?" I asked weakly to the monster as he waited patiently for me to pull myself together. "We both serve the master. We both wage war for his amusement. The finite suffering of man is ecstasy to his infinite existence. The emotions displayed in the heat of battle are the most potent, delicious to his palate. Master cannot feel these things for himself. His greatness surpasses these crude emotions. But he can feel its sharp bite when your kind bleed and die in his domain. But you grow stale. Your kind have become too cocky. You no longer fear the darkness of this realm. It has become," the desecrator paused, considering its words, "routine." I tried to comprehend what the desecrator was saying to me. It is true that this war had become a business, just like every other war in human history. We had trained and conditioned our soldiers to suppress their emotions, or risk going insane from the horrors they faced. We had gained new insight in technology and arcane powers, due to reverse engineering the portal. After 50 years under constant attack, always pushing the deadies back, we'd gotten used to how things were. Situational normal, all fucked up. You think by your own strength you hold the master at bay? You are mistaken. He allows you to survive. He allows your world to remain untouched. But you disrespect his awesome terror. Your meager offering do not appease him anymore. You must be severely punished, and be witness to his great power, the desecrator lectured. Decimation, I croaked harshly. The word flooded my mind, forcing me to speak it. The creature wanted me to say the name of the punishment it would be handing down. Decimation, I repeated again. I knew decimation to be a form of punishment used by the Romans in ancient times. 10 men would have to draw straws, with the shortest straw losing. 9 of the men were forced to beat the 10th man to death. Some accounts even say they were forced to crucify their fellow unlucky soldier. It was a task performed to punish unruly or lazy soldiers, making them fear their commander's wrath and conditioning them to follow any order given to them. I tried to swallow, but I felt bile rising in my throat. I was afraid the vomit would choke me to death while I was frozen this way. But the master has shown favor on you, Captain, the desecrator said. He grabbed the collar of my fatigues and ripped them off of me in a clean stroke. I felt the cold air hit my bare skin, and I was disgusted by thinking of what this monster had planned for me. He has noticed your transgressions. You play with powers beyond your station, the monster said, while running its finger down my chest, tracing the outlines of the fresh tattoos I had all over my body. You try to use the powers of the old ones to fight back. It is a stolen power, the desecrator said to my face, his horrid breath almost making me vomit again. He stabbed his finger into my skin, and my dark tattoos began to burn me. As they started to glow bright white, I screamed as my skin smoked and sizzled. The tattoos were an intricate web, crafted by the scientists in charge of occult studies. The designs spiraled all over my body, forming forbidden symbols in an ancient language. Now, every inch of the ink burned with a white fury. I was one of 7 officers volunteered to be test subjects for this new project. we would be bonded with the dark powers of this hell world. Researchers made breakthroughs by studying the symbols of writings found in this hell. They said they could twist the evil power to be used as a weapon. I was one of the 3 that survived the experiment in the end. The other 4 went mad. They either killed themselves or tried to kill others. My friend, Lieutenant Patrick, had been found dead in his holding cell. He had eaten his own fingers and part of his stomach before dying of blood loss. The trick for me was to not look at the tattooed symbols inked all over my body. I requested to be blindfolded and restrained for days after the procedure. I made sure to always have my skin covered. Only my face was free from the scarred, tainted flesh. But the experiment had worked. At the moment of my death, I would recite an unholy prayer in a language taught to me. My body would burn. Oh, it would burn so bad. And I would teleport to appear half crazed and naked on the other end of the portal. I would be back on Earth. I would have been teleported across the gap through dimensions. It was like having my very own ejection seat, like fighter pilots had. I had used it on 2 other occasions in the last 5 years, always when on the brink of death. I would only use it when the deadies were at my throat, when all was lost. Usually I was the one that was last alive, but sometimes I left behind fellow soldiers that couldn't be saved. But it was for the greater good. Humanity needed men that went out there without fear. Men who were uncorruptible by the realm's maddening effects. It needed leaders that could bravely lead men into battle with unimaginable horrors. I had to lead from the front to show bravery. None of my men knew about my little teleportation trick, my get-out-of-hell-free card. I had been with my current group of soldiers for the past 2.5 years. I had led them bravely and safely against countless nightmares. I made sure to minimize casualties while still accomplishing the mission. I kept them safe. Until now, that is. At first, my master was angry with your trick. Angry that you stole part of his power to flee the battlefield, denying him his delicious agony of your dying, said the spinely creature. The unnatural bass in the voice sent shivers down my spine. But I intervened for you. I saw you for what you were. Not quite a wolf in sheep's clothing, but a coward wearing a warrior's face. It hissed at me, and I felt the words cut deep. That's how we are brothers. You lead the humans to the chopping block, and I lead the executioners to their prey. You do it again and again, and I do the same. So keep bringing your kind to die for my master's pleasure. Your larger world will be spared, as long as you remain interesting. Keep my master from growing tired of your continued existence. The thing stepped back and raised its black sword over its head again. My tattoos began to sting and burn with a new, raw energy. But you humans must be punished for trying to cheat my master. A grievance that only the payment of blood will suffice. Much, much blood. My master is a jealous god, and is angered when his flesh is stolen from him. I knew what was coming now. I wouldn't be able to recite the cursed words of teleportation in time. My mouth was frozen anyways, making me unable to pronounce the proper syllables. I would be killed for good this time, to die with my men at last. I thought the finality would give me peace. I had always imagined I would be stoic and calm when the time came, but I was terrified. My heart jumped in my chest, like a rat desperately trying to escape a sinking ship or a burning house. I didn't want to die. I would do anything to survive. Ah, yes, the fear, the creature boomed. I see this too in you, brother captain. I intervened on your behalf because of this fact. Like I have fealty to my master, you are of a singular loyalty above all else. You worship your own survival, making you the perfect toy to be played with. A man only interested in one's own survival over any government or god. You will serve both masters, regardless. So I part with you a gift. A completed spell your kind so feebly tried to replicate. A gift, so you may continue bringing my master more bodies to rip open and squeeze out such vivid pleasures. Before I could make sense of the desecrator's words, the ebony blade streaked across my sight. A cold corruption ignited my neck down, feeling the rest of my body shut off like a switch. I could still see and think for the moment, being magically held in place. Then the blood began to clog my throat. I tried to cough, but failed as my lungs filled with a thick fluid and my vision faded. Before I was gone, before the loss of time, before I was reborn in pain, I noticed the expression on the face the creature had stolen. The corners on the mouth curled upwards. It was smiling as I died. I don't remember a lot of what happened next. I was briefed and debriefed constantly until I was lucid enough to retain the information. I could only go by what surveillance footage I was shown after I died. The 3 military strongholds on the hell side, Alamo, Thermo, and Vox, all fell within hours. The dark tide of mutated claws and teeth broke through every defense. Deadies in the thousands, overflowed trenches soaked up bullets, and suffocated any form of retreat or counterattack. With a new zeal and hatred, the enemy charged into gunfire and smashed themselves up against hardened barricades. Eventually, one of them would detonate themselves with explosives in a burst of gore. The gaps in the defenses created by the blast would quickly be clogged up and bursted through with the tide of rancid bodies. Coordination in defense was broken and hectic, different languages shouting different orders over each other on the radio. All military decorum lost in the grip of hectic fighting. We had never seen anything like this, on any scale. The deadies advanced with unprecedented ferocity, but between the scattered communication, one report remained collaborative and clear. They all reported the tall, dark figure with the face of a man, striding calmly amongst the battlefield. When Alamo fell, and the portal back to Earth was compromised, the brass gave the order to shoot any soldier of any nation caught retreating back through the portal to Earth. The deadies had never made it through to our home turf before, and we were all terrified at the prospect. I remember being made to watch the camera feed mounted in the large hangar, filming the Earthside portal. It was the portal I had just walked through, with 25 of my men only hours before losing my head. Now the loading bay was entwined with razor wire. A panicked and impromptu defense put in place, as humanity quickly lost control of the battle. Hundreds of soldiers and Marines from different nations, all uniting in one common goal: to keep the hell contained, keeping it from bursting forth into our world like rotting guts spilling from a swollen carcass. Trucks and forklifts were being moved to give firing squads better line of sight on the portal. Heavy machine guns, shotguns, and grenade launchers being handed out. The World War II era weapons discarded for more modern firepower. Contingency Plan John 1135 was enacted. The hangar and base was sealed shut. Bayonets were affixed to the end of barrels, and automated turrets installed along the walls were brought online. At least 150 to 200 heavily armed fighting men cramped shoulder to shoulder, filing the large hangar, all with weapons trained on the portal. From a camera high in the corner, I observed the nervous suspense of all the men. The room was almost motionless, except for some nervous twitching here and there, the stamping of feet or the rising smoke of one last cigarette before the chaos. Nothing but the sounds of gear and ammo being checked and rechecked, and muttered prayers in the forever moments before the battle. I could almost feel the fear and desperation coming off of the men. But there was something else. Something new. Some men stood tall with determination, and maybe even bravery. But I guess it's easy to stand in front of death when your escape routes were sealed off, and surrender was a ridiculous notion. I bet if the exit doors were still open, half the soldiers would tactically withdraw, just like I would have. The portal was an ugly, unnatural-looking thing. It looked like two burnt black trees rising out of the ground to arc towards each other at the top. They were made of a hard, shiny onyx material, with small, twig-like spikes protruding out from all over them. The two pillars were 7 meters apart, rising 4 feet high, before curving inwards towards each other, barely touching at the tips to form an arc. Hindsight being 20/20, I realized they looked like they were made out of the same material as the headless monster. There was an undescribable wrongness about the twin pillars. It always gave off a low hum you could feel in your teeth. It also slightly distorted your vision when you stood too close to it. Many had reported developing a copper-like or sickly sweet taste in their mouths. Technicians and soldiers that only worked on the earth side of the gap had complained of depression and angry outbursts from being in close proximity for too long. The unholy pillars had sprouted out of the ground at the end of the First World War, near the city of Verdun. It seemed to lay dormant during World War II, with only one squad of French resistance fighters disappearing, followed by the Allied rescue team sent to find them. It wasn't until the 50s, during the Cold War, that we started to realize what it was. Let's just say whatever God was on the other side. It didn't appreciate all the spy games and political intrigue. The evil bastard wanted the wholesale slaughter, with bodies piled in a field. So more and more people started disappearing, abducted, to be taken to the other side to suffer for its amusement. The alarm and flashing orange hazard lights mounted above the portal started going off, signaling an incoming teleportation pod was incoming across the gap. The obnoxious whooping sound of the warning signs echoed deafeningly across the chamber. The fluorescent lights flickered eerily as the power surge pulled heavily from the building's generators. We had found out through multiple trials that one solid sealed object could be transported safely across dimensions, one at a time. So the engineering boys whipped up tight transport pods to be loaded with men and equipment to teleport back and forth. Anything organic was microwaved and melded together, if not protected inside the pods. Now we were lucky to only receive sunburns on any uncovered skin. So whoever or whatever was coming from the other side must be stuffed in the transport pods we left behind. We all knew that deadies could duplicate strategies and actions performed by humans. So a teleportation pod packed with deadies wasn't out of the picture. The alarm gave a final cautionary warning before the white flash of the teleport manifested its cargo between the two pillars. The security camera I was watching took a second to recalibrate and refocus. But when it did, there was an enormous blob of bloody flesh, instead of the metal pod I expected. Before the tank-sized blob of gore sprang off the loading bay, I saw what it really was. It was dozens of deadies mutated and melted together. Steam billowed off its burnt exterior. Legs and hands propelled it into a rolling motion. Between the limbs, I could see mutated and screaming faces. They hadn't used the pod. They had all gone through the teleport at the same time, melding all of their bodies together. Somehow I knew this wasn't random. I knew the Desecrator had somehow orchestrated this hideous outcome. I won't go into every gory detail, but you must already know by now that the oozing pus-filled blob of hands and feet killed all of the soldiers in the room. Once it hit the first line of men, it easily engulfed their bodies, grabbing and tearing at them, adding their body parts to the flesh pile. At one point, the blob had gotten itself cornered at the side of the hangar. The well-disciplined soldiers had repositioned out of harm's way to continue pelting it with machine gun fire and grenades. The quivering mass shook and vibrated as it tried to press back against the hail of gunfire. Then the warning alarm went off again, and the orange hazard lights began blinking. Some new hell was being sent over from the other side. The men closest to the portal had to turn and face the new threat, dividing the amount of suppressive fire on the blob. Soon the flash, signifying an incoming teleport, blinded the area. The blob pinned against the wall separated into 6 smaller sized parts, each taking off in different directions. Half of the soldiers immediately opened fire on the streaming teleport pod that suddenly appeared, while the other half tried to shoot down the faster, more agile blobs. 2 of the smaller gore pieces launched airborne to come down onto the desperate defenders. They were tornadoes of spinning limbs and jagged, broken bones, slicing and mutilating anyone near them. The biggest chunk of combined deadies had stayed in the corner when the other piece broke off of it. When they all separated from the host, the larger chunk rose up on spider-like elongated bone legs. The flesh at the top peeled away to expose gore-caked machine guns, surrounded by bulbous faces. Somehow the wicked weapons could still fire, as it started mowing down defenders with a barrage of bullets. The transport pod's door fell open, and a dozen heavily armed deadies came rushing out. The first deadies in the pack held cruel metal slabs as shields. Somehow all were dressed with metal helmets and tattered uniforms. The front line holding the shields only had shovel-shaped entrenching tools to bludgeon any humans that got close enough. The rest of the mutated soldiers had large firearms with abnormally large barrels, ejecting giant shells as they butchered their human enemies. It was nothing but slaughter then. The soldiers put up a valiant defense, but it's hard to fight off an enemy that has you surrounded and is already within melee range. After the last scream ran through the hangar, I was still forced to watch the recording. The camera showed the blood-drenched floor. The unrelenting deadies hammered and tore at the dead soldier. Just the sounds of bones breaking and flesh tearing could be heard. Finally, one last figure emerged from the dark opening of the teleport pod. It stood tall and proud after it emerged to the bigger chamber. Its bones were black, and the long sword was once again sticking through its chest. It angled its human head to look up at the camera high in the corner. It was my face staring back at me, like some sort of distorted mirror. It had taken my head, and now it would return it to this world. Before the desecrator left our world, the few remaining bodies fell lifeless to the ground, their purpose fulfilled. The creature twisted my head off of its lower jaw and tossed it, rolling down the loading ramp to bump against a dismembered arm of a slain soldier. With this business done, the headless creature flashed out of existence. Without any warning from the lights or alarms, this brought up a dreaded question. Did it even need the portal to travel to our world? I'm told hours later, the response teams bursted through the sealed doors and stormed the chamber. That's when they found me. All of me. I was naked, alive, and talking out of my head. My new body had changed. The tattoos that covered my body had been tweaked and redone. The spell had been optimized to work better. The spiderweb of designs ran up my neck, mouth, and cheeks now, only to stop at the point where the desecrator had ripped off my previous jawbone. A lot of things happened during the following months of my quarantine. I was in a fugue state, preaching non-stop about the glories of the dark god, and lacking the sense to go to the toilet before relieving myself. But a lot more things happened in the wider world because of the unholy incursion into our world. Most of the world's leaders experienced vivid hallucinations or night terrors at the instant the desecrator invaded. The dark god spoke to all of them through visions. He was not pleased with the entertainment and sacrifice we had previously been providing him. The decimation also began. 1 out of 10. Precisely 1 out of 10 people were beaten to death by their fellow co-workers. It affected everybody who knew of the existence of the portal and the endless battle. A poor 10th person was selected to be brutally killed by 9 others privy to the secret. All the murdering men and women confessed to falling into a trance-like rage that only passed hours after their chosen victim was mutilated and torn apart. The memory of the murder was left as a vivid warning in all the unwilling participants' minds. Hurricanes, freak tidal waves, and earthquakes all rocked the globe. The desecrator showed us what could happen if the dark god touched our reality for only a few minutes. Behind closed doors, the leaders of Earth declared that enemy forces could never again pass into our realm. Recruitment and funding was quadrupled. A new plan was concocted. It proposed we declassify the secret war and let it out to the public, but only if it got much worse. PR teams were already working on posters and recruitment commercials to appeal to the youth of their respected nations. So that left only me. I thought for sure I would be killed or locked away forever. But the visions our leader suffered expressly forbid this response. Seems the dark god had taken a liking to me. Long story a little shorter. The brass was okay with just giving me 3 meals a day and letting me rot away in a black site holding cell. But painful visions started plaguing my superiors until they allowed me to return to the battlefield. I was given a test run, allowed to go back through the portal with a new group of men. I had to be completely covered since the tattoo had spread to my face. This was okay. I didn't want the men I led to know how far I had fallen. I knew what the desecrator and its master wanted. I was to lead by example, cause my men to have bravery and push forward, only to be eventually killed. False hope tastes better than no hope, you see. I kept the codename Sharon for my dead unit. It seemed fitting as I led my kind into Hades to die. The deadies were far more vicious and more numerous than before. Over 3,000 lives were lost taking back the Vox outpost. But if the deadies were getting tougher, then so were the soldiers sent to fight them. No longer skimping on the modern weaponry, Our boys went over with the latest in killing machines. There was a new urgency in the hearts of men, just what the Dark God wanted. It took another 6 months of constant fighting to push the Deddies back past Alamo again. I died 4 times during this period, only to manifest back in my holding cell, shitty as new. I can't say the same for the men I left on the battlefield. I refused to be a pawn for the desecrator and my government. I had to keep my men safe. I had to help humanity. Once we had taken back all we lost, I jumped the wire and marched out into the muddy wasteland. I began to sink into the slop, and I knew this would be a particularly painful death. But I didn't have to wait long. The desecrator emerged, wearing the rotting head of some poor kid. I told him that the scraps it gave us weren't enough. It was pushing too hard without any reward for our efforts in sight. We needed a light at the end of the tunnel, even if it was a fake light. I explained that humans might give up and try and surrender. We might try and reason with the entity. The desecrator was not pleased. Its master did not want servants. It wanted war. It wanted bloodshed. A deal was struck. Any mud my men stepped foot on now slowly became solid. We could push the Deddies back for miles and miles. We could breathe again. We could have hope. We could win. That little stunt took some suspicion off of me on where my allegiances fell, but it also meant I was heading over to fight more and fight longer. But in the end, we'd force the Deddies back and gain 30 miles of breathing room. It's a false triumph. We are gaining ground just to have it taken right back. This will cause the brass to panic and overreact. They will probably start the draft again. Young boys and girls, trained just enough to be put on the assembly line heading for the chopping block. They will lie to you. They will say you are a new breed of soldier. They will say you are pioneers to other galaxies. When you don't come back, they will tell your family you're deployed somewhere top secret. You will go through basic and be taught the bare minimum. You will know how to fire a rifle and dig a trench. Then, you will be sent to the front. You might see me when you get there. You'll be told to do anything I say. You'll know me from my face obscured with a mask and the 1,000-yard stare. I'll be leading the charge, but I am not a hero. I am in hell. But I'll try to keep you alive as long as I can. But we will all die in the end. A sacrifice to appease the master. You'll be told your death will keep annihilation at bay for the moment. But in reality, you're just a small cog in the wheels of war. More meat for the grinder. Just so the people back home can continue to kill each other for other pointless reasons. Try not to think about your soul. Like, does it stay in that hell when you die? Or does it come back to our world? I don't know. Just be sure to get close to whoever you worship before taking the jaunt, just to be safe. My fear is the Dark God will grow bored of the game. With a snap of its fingers, it could invade our space, causing madness and death on a catastrophic scale. So we must fight. We must appease him. We have no other choice. We have to try.